Hi folks, James here, and welcome to the Spiro Circle. I've been thinking a lot about trauma recently. As we approach the 2-year anniversary of the October 7 Hamas attack on Israel, we can see now the effect and damage that the war is having on the country and its people. Not just on a macro level, but on the single, granular level felt by each and every person. Everyone responds to trauma differently. The power comes in how we can identify and treat it to avoid it getting worse over time. Personally, I found the days after October 7 incredibly traumatic. Not only in the sense of my physical safety and myself, my loved ones, and making sure everyone was okay, but traumatic by seeing the response in the West to Israel's reaction, the explosion of antisemitism that came our way afterwards, and the disassociation between Israel and the West, once considered the strongest of allies. On today's episode, I'm joined by Gina Ross, a trauma specialist, author, and founder and president of the International Trauma Healing Institute. Her new book, October 7, A Call to Action for Israel, Jews, and the World, explores how the Hamas attacks were not just a national tragedy, but also a turning point for Israel, for Jewish people, and the broader world. Drawing on her expertise in trauma, Gina frames anti-Semitism and radical violence as cycles of unhealed collective trauma. She argues that October 7 offers a chance for healing, unity, and moral clarity. The conversation you're about to see, we talk about what redemption may look like in practice, not just in theory, the transformations that she believes are necessary for Israel and its allies, and how ordinary people, me, you, and anyone watching this, how we can play a role in answering this call to action. I hope you enjoy. Gina, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you for making it for me.
Of course, it's a very...
Actually.
Thank you. It's a very important time that we're speaking today. For the viewers and listeners who may be catching up, we are approaching the 2-year anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel from Gaza on October 7, 2023. And I wanted to talk to you because I wanted to understand trauma. And I wanted to understand the impact of trauma, the cause of trauma, and some of the remedies or some of the mechanisms that people can apply to overcome some of that. So first of all, I wanted to kind of hear it from you exactly, what it is you do and where your focus is. For those at home who may not know, Gina, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a trauma specialist, author, and you're founder of the International Trauma Healing Institute. So tell me a bit about that, and then we'll dive a bit deeper into the book that I have right next to me.
Yeah. So about 30 years ago, I became aware of the impact of trauma. Not personally, it was not a personal experience for me, or so I thought that it wasn't. And I was very interested in transpersonal psychology. And then I realized that people who are traumatized cannot go to that level until we heal their trauma. And that's how I became interested in trauma. And then Peter Levine, who I was studying with, who created the somatic experiencing, said a sentence that was very vital for me. Like, I just changed all my orientation. And he said that trauma was at the root of violence. And I went like, wow, I have to take this to the Middle East. It was like immediate as an understanding. And that has been running my life for the last 30 years, actually. It took a long time to organize a very big conference in Israel, and I created the institute. And I also have been teaching in Israel for the last 25 years, 4 times a year, from LA to Israel every time, and created a model that we call the Ross model. And somehow I intuitively, from the beginning, and I understood that we're going to need to heal collective trauma. That's the only way that we can go to peace, is by healing trauma at the collective level.
Well, I want to talk more about that, the collective level of trauma, because Israel may be
Right.
a bit of a unique country in the sense that its people are always experiencing some level of trauma, and that
Right.
trauma can be new or it can be inherited. So I want to talk about the book that we've been mentioning, and why while we're talking today. I did read it, which I really enjoyed. I've got it up here. It's on my Kindle, so I don't know if the quality
Oh,
is
exactly.
good.
Very
Yeah,
good
yeah. So I
point.
don't know. I wish I had a hard copy. I always prefer reading the hard copies of books.
Hold it straight, that's all.
I'll
Hold it
put it up.
straight.
I'll make sure there's a link and everything. The book is
Okay.
called October 7: A Call to Action. The full title is actually October 7: A Call to Action for Israel, Jews, and the World: An Opportunity for Repair and Redemption in the 21st Century.
Yeah.
Why this book now, on the 2-year anniversary of October 7? Why did you choose to write a book about the collective trauma that Israel and Jewish people may be experiencing?
Because it followed everything that I knew and everything that I had been predicting also and everything I've been afraid of. But there was something that was much more possible in terms of potential for goodness. That's what struck me also from what I know about the healing of trauma, what's possible. So I think October 7th was a very momentous historical moment, not only for Israel and the Jewish people, but it's really for the world in many ways. And these ideas are not necessarily completely new, but they just materialized after October 7th. They became much more like, okay, that makes sense. I can do this. I can see that. This is what we can do. And we always come from what we call the healing vortex. What can help get out of the trauma? What can help heal? What can help bring peace? What can help people have a very different vision of what to expect? So it's really about that. And that was my mission in Israel, to bring healing to the population. Actually started thinking that I would bring peace to the Middle East by healing trauma. And I was thinking many years ago about the Palestinians and the Israelis together. And I did actually do training in Ramallah and worked also with Arabs in Israel and with the Arabs in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank. And then it was becoming very difficult to do that. And I said, okay, there's a lot of trauma in Israel. There's a lot of polarization between our own people. Let's focus in there and the people that are asking for it. And it has been really going very, very interestingly. And I have lots of students. I train thousands of students, and basically they are handling everything that's happening in a very different way because of what they've learned. Just because our technique is not only about healing trauma, it's about releasing stress and trauma and also preventing trauma. So somatic experiencing, it was created by Dr. Peter Levine. And basically it's a body-mind technique that really understands that the definition of trauma per se is the energy stuck in the nervous system when people cannot fight or flee successfully and they freeze. So the stress hormones energy that's released in the body to allow us to fight or flee is actually stuck in the body because of the freeze. If it doesn't get discharged, it becomes symptoms, traumatic symptoms.
And what are
And
those
then
symptoms apart from freezing? What do those symptoms?
everything. So the symptoms are the freeze is going to affect what we call the whole CIBAM level, like the thought, thinking becomes very confused, very polarized, very black and white, difficulty to learn for children, for example, or to focus. At the emotional level, a huge reactivity, exaggerated feelings, even when it's not appropriate anymore. At the physiology, a lot of pain in the body, a lot of tension and pain in the body, and eventually, if it's not cured, and it takes time, it becomes immune system disorders and illnesses. At the behavioral level, of all kind of addictive, impulsive behavior that also happens. So it really affects us at every single level of our development.
Wow.
And different people will manifest different symptoms along
And so
this path.
how do you go about treating things like that aside from aside from self-treatment, which I imagine is some of the cause of some of these issues, which is people try to self-medicate or take
They
care of
self-medicate, but
themselves.
it's not really a medication, right? It's not really a medication. It's just self-medication. It doesn't, well, it works to diminish, to handle, to cope, but it doesn't really heal the person. And there's a huge price for these self-medications. So, and here's the wonderful thing. If the definition of trauma is about stuck energy in the body and movements of defense that were not completed, then the healing is very simple. Release the stuck energy from the body and complete the movements of defense that didn't get a chance to be completed. It took the stigma away from the word trauma because, oh, it's a reaction from the nervous system to an event that's overwhelming and that produced all of those stress hormones in the body, which is very powerful energy.
Wow. No, it's amazing. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So we work directly with the body, with the nervous system. For example, I'll tell you to think about the event that was really upsetting for you, traumatizing, and then what do you notice in your body, like the inner sensations. So my heart is beating fast. I have we say in Hebrew, gula bagaron. I have a lump in the throat. My
Yeah.
chest is restricted. My stomach is in knots. My neck is hurting. Right? My body is tense. All of these expressions, because we're born with inherently with a mechanism of self-regulation. All we have to do is get that mechanism to work again. How do we do it? We focus on one sensation at a time, and then the body, the healer, which is the biggest gift that we have, that we can give to people, to understand that their body is capable of healing them, does the job. It discharges that energy of this one sensation at a time. So you don't go into the full trauma, you don't get re-traumatized when you're trying to work with that. You do it slowly. We call it titration, like a little bit at a time, like homeopathy, which is much more compassionate, much kinder. And then we take one sensation at a time and we release it. There are 7 signs of release, and all of that is in my little video for the public, which has been given to the world for free, so we can let people know about it later. There's 7 signs of discharge. The breath that comes by itself, a deep breath, yawning, trembling and shaking, heat wave, warm sweat, gurgling of the stomach, and goosebumps. Any one of those mean actually that my body by itself, not me doing it consciously, but involuntarily, releases the energy stuck in that one sensation of constriction.
Wow.
And then we do one after the other, then we go over the event again until there's no charge at all. What happened? That means that my nervous system was able to digest the event, process and digest it, and put it aside the way my mechanism knew how to do in the first place. But when there's too much happening and too fast and too early and all of these things happening at the same time, that mechanism of self-regulation breaks down. So our method, all it does is put that mechanism to work again in a very simple way.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing and explaining for those who may not be familiar with treating trauma, let alone identifying trauma. You know, sometimes
Right.
people don't even know when they're feeling the trauma, let alone how to tackle it and how to treat it. I want to now talk a bit about what you've just spoken about and apply it to the book and some of the lessons that we can understand from the book. So you talk about collective trauma reenactment from the Hamas attack and the parallels to pre-Holocaust Nazi era. So you draw those parallels. Talk me through about what those look like to you and where those parallels may come from a trauma point of view.
Yeah. So the first thing that we need to recognize is to understand actually that when trauma is not healed, it tends to repeat itself. So you can have people that, get into 10 car accidents one after the other. So at the collective level, a trauma that is not healed can manifest again a century later, 2 centuries later, 5 years later. It doesn't matter, like depending on the conditions and the circumstances that take place, right? So you have the Holocaust, but the pre-Holocaust, what was happening? It was anti-Semitism in the Nazi era. Anti-Semitism has always been there. But what happened in the Nazi era, it reached its paroxysm. It's really very high level. And it actually also involved all of Europe and most of the world. When you think about it, that Jews have not been able to find refuge almost anywhere except for a few islands, then you realize that that had really had a huge repercussion. So you see all of a sudden that this is happening again. We have a paroxysm of anti-Semitism. It's going all over the world. But it didn't happen just now. What was going on throughout the decades, if you see, every time that Israel got into a battle with Hamas, rallies were happening around the world against Israel. It's just that this time it was a maximum effect. Even countries that don't even have Jews were participating in the rallies. So you really understand that that energy did not go away. That energy did not get addressed enough. Maybe Germany, of all the countries, was the only one that did a real mea culpa, but the rest of the world didn't. They tried, they eliminated anti-Semitism for a couple of decades, and we kind of got lulled into this, that we're fine, and the diaspora Jews were doing very well in most of the Western countries, and we had the golden era of American Judaism here, Jewry in here in the US. So we really thought that, okay, we put it to sleep. But it wasn't addressed where it comes from, how to handle it, where it's still manifesting itself, how do we go to the root of it? That was not addressed. So it's going to reemerge and reemerge. And October 7th was the perfect time for it, where you saw the explosion of it. That's why I call it the reenactment of a very, not far away, very close trauma, which is only 80 years ago, where we had the Holocaust happening.
Yeah.
So that's the concept of reenactment.
You're reminding me of a trip that I took earlier this year to the Nova Festival, and it was a kind of memorial to everyone that fell during the Hamas attack, and there were people older than me, so it was kind of the in their 40s and 50s, even up to their 60s, and so for me it was super interesting because I grew up seeing the trauma of older generations from the Holocaust era, and here I was now, 80 years after that, standing with much older people who were, and I'm 40, 50, up to 70s and 80s. Suddenly, it wasn't their grandparents' trauma; it was the trauma of their grandchildren. So
And
now,
their own.
the generational trauma has kind of reversed. It's gone from look at the trauma from our ancestors to look at the trauma of our descendants. And so you see the through line of that trauma. And I saw that when I was standing in Nova. I could see this bubbling, the bubbling of trauma, the bubbling of anti-Semitism, all these things. It's just a through line. I found that extremely profound, and how generations are going to react to that is quite compelling. You describe October 7 in the book as not only a tragedy but an opportunity for redemption. So you highlighted it briefly just now when we were speaking. Explain it now. Like, where's the opportunity for redemption, and for who?
Okay, so there are a few things. First of all, it was a very, very important transformative day. And what do I mean by that? It really brought to the fore a lot of percolating issues that have been going on for many years, and they were not being addressed. Some organizations were bright enough and clear enough and objective enough and clear-eyed enough to see it, but most of, including the Jewish people, including the Israelis, including the rest of the world that is supposed to be ethical and caring and compassionate, were really not addressing what was going on, what was percolating. So the fact that it put everything in front of us that we need to look at and face, I thought that was very important. And I can cite you some of the stuff that I think that were brought up. Would that be of interest to you?
Please,
So
yes.
first of all, the anti-Semitism that's still there. It's not an issue that's gone. That now it's like right in your eyes. There is no way to avoid it. Finally, we have to address it. And then it really showed the moral crisis in the West, and the catastrophe of the corruptive education of Western youth, supposedly with the right education, that are going for Hamas and approving what Hamas did. So something like the moral crisis of the West became, I think, much clearer. Then you have, with the aid of what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, there was a spotlight on Iran, much more focused on what was happening with Iran and the possibility of nuclear weapons. And then the axis that was getting formed between Russia and China and Iran that came from as a result of the war in Ukraine. So all of that stuff that's coming up, the tensions between the West and communist Asia, the threat of fundamental Islam became really much more in our face, I think, this time. And also the reality of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, that this is not about territory. This is really about a cultural religious war. This is not, oh, we need our autonomy, we need our independence, we need our identity. No, our identity is at the cost of your existence. And this clarity has not come over to everybody, but some people really woke up, including among the Jews, to recognize that. And definitely with the American administration today, they're very clear about it. So that's the good thing, that we were able to see all of that. It's like, okay, here are the issues facing us. This is what we need to confront. Now, why do I say that we have a very different possibility than another Holocaust? Because there were changes that happened in the world, in the different cultures, that didn't exist at the time of the Holocaust.
Gina, I want to dive a bit more into the transformations themselves. So the way that the book is structured is that you have these 8 transformations, and
Right.
each transformation is an identifier for how the world reacted or responded or learned from October 7. So I just want to start with the first one. The first transformation, you said, is that the Jews can defend themselves. Now, that wasn't the case 80 years ago in the Holocaust era. They didn't have a state of Israel. They didn't have an IDF. How can Israel project the military strength it has today in the IDF and just as a sovereign nation, and the moral legitimacy in the world, in a world that often sees it as more of the Goliath than the David? Does that make sense? How does Israel kind of balance that dual
Yeah.
reputation?
So first, in terms of the transformation, just to talk about that, because this is really what made me write the book. It's not to spell out the trauma, because we already know about it and lots of people are talking about it, but what is possible that most people don't see. And there are transformations that happen in the world that I think can take us into redemption instead of reenactment, repetition of the Holocaust, hopefully, okay? So the first one, as I indicated in the book, has to do with the Jewish people themselves and the existence of Israel, that for the first time in 2,000 years of history, the Jews can defend themselves. They have a nation and they have an IDF, and it's a pretty powerful IDF. Now, regarding your question, it's a very astute one, and it's something that I've been looking at it. We definitely look with the IDF strength and the intelligence of Israel that we are a superpower. They call us a superpower. We call ourselves a military superpower. So that doesn't go with the idea of a David. That goes with the idea of a Goliath. Specifically in historical time, where anything that has to do with power, military power, is looked at as oppressive, as bad, as something negative, as authoritarian. And there's a real cult of the underdog, no matter what are the intentions of the underdog. So it's a real conundrum for Israel to to have to deal with this image, because one of the things that Israel cannot afford to do is to present itself as weak. I mean, you could say we're truly in danger. It's a constant danger. We lose one battle, we're done, we're gone, right? I mean, like there's just constant stuff about what Iran can do, and what if all the Arab countries just came up against Israel, what would happen? Like this is ongoing. The threat is ongoing, but we can't feed that kind of images. We have to feed the image of strength, which then feeds the image of a Goliath, right? So there's that issue, I think, that is really a conundrum for us, and for sure it's not something that's easy to do. And I think one of the things is to really repeat and say it's true that we're strong. I think we have dialogues. We don't have memes and slogans. We need to get slogans. Free Palestine. We need that kind of stuff. Liberate the Jews, or let them out of Egypt, and the Egypt of threat.
Free Palestine from Hamas. That was the most effective one, I think, for a long time.
Exactly. Get the Jews out of the Egypt. No, we cannot use the word Egypt, but get the Jews out of the slavery of threat, of living in constant threat, generation after generation after generation. It didn't stop because we have Israel. World, wake up, what are you doing? That kind of conversation, repeating over and over that we are in constant danger. Not that we're weak, but that we are in constant danger. And that's what people need to understand, both about our reactions and the support that they need to bring, what they need to address in terms of the international level.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's questioning or challenging Israel's fight online, which I think everyone agrees is not as strong or not as effective as the other side. And that's something I've been hearing for years, is that Israel is just strong militarily, and it's strong in protection of its sovereign nation and of its people, but it's just terrible at the online discourse, and it's not doing well at all.
I actually don't agree with that anymore. I used to, but what I realized we have right now, and that's what gave me a lot of hope. There are people like Douglas Murray, for example, that are constant spokespeople for us. There are several in the Arab countries. There are several that are coming up in Jordan, one that came up several in Saudi Arabia. We're talking about places that you wouldn't expect that, okay? That are saying that we have the right to exist, and this is our place, and this is the holy temple for us, etc., etc. And they're doing all the hasbara that we need in the world. General Camp, for example, the same thing. Constantine, and there I can cite like at least a dozen doing the PR for us. They don't get through. They don't get through because of the anti-Semitism. And that's why Israel could not get through, no matter what it tried and all of that stuff. So I think, and here's where I think there's a little bit of a difference. We have to challenge the world about its ongoing anti-Semitism, particularly Europe, but also the West, not only in Europe, it's other parts of the West too, because it's latent. They think they're free of it, and they're not. If you're free of it, you don't cuddle Iran, who has been threatening the destruction of Israel totally openly for the last 50 years, without making them pay a price for it, without saying anything about it. So, like, you need to recognize, and at the same time is the invitation, and here's your opportunity to correct what happened during the Holocaust time, and redeem your nations, and redeem your civilizations, and redeem the world, and redeem the international organizations.
So that's a big call to action for the West, and you are quite harsh to the West in the book. You don't hold back in your criticisms to it and of it. I want to read back something that you said about the West and Israel. You wrote,
But I also invite them, right? I also invite them to forgive themselves, that it's okay. We can let go. We have let go. Let go of your guilt. acknowledge it and let go of it. So I'm
Yeah.
not harsh just to be like, oh, you're terrible and that's it. No, I know
No,
you're
tough
with me.
tough is fair. You can be
Okay,
tough and
good.
fair. Yeah, you can do tough
Good.
love.
Okay.
I'm a big believer in tough love. I just want to finish what I was saying, which is what you wrote about Israel and the West. You wrote, quote, Israel must insist that while it may need the West for weapons and international diplomacy, the West needs Israel just as much, if not more. So what did you mean by that?
Oh, so many things, so many things. First of all, even just the weapons. I mean, do you know how much the West relies on Israel intelligence against terror? It's tremendous.
No, it's a lot, yeah. Yeah.
I think Trump said something like they're worth five. The Mossad is worth five FBI or CIA or something like that. They're very, very strong because our survival is at stake. We have no choice but to be excellent about it. That's one thing that the West is benefiting. Then we buy Western weapons and we show how they work and we improve them and we show their success. So they are selling tons of weapons on the account of what Israel is capable of doing with them. So already economically we are doing something for them. But I think there's something much more subtle than that. Is that Israel, because its survival is so clearly at stake and it's not as obvious for other countries, Israel is showing what it means to have a youth that is courageous, that is brave, and that will fight for its survival, for its civilization. So we are a model, actually. Israel is a model of where the West has to take its youth towards and its capacity to understand what is the dangers. That's one thing. Second, think about it. No matter what's happening in Israel, horrible, horrible things, terror all the time, on the index of happiness, they always come among the first 10 countries, like the eighth country, even now. So what's that about? You know what's that about? Is that we have families and we have children. We're the only Western-oriented country that is not only replacing itself, but more than replacing itself. And the others are not. So we are a model of something that's very important. And the productivity, despite all of the danger that's going on, the productivity of science and discoveries for humanity, for the well-being of humanity, whether it's tech or medical or anything else that we bring into the world or agricultural, it's like that is also a model. So
Yeah.
I think that the West has a lot to learn from Israel.
Wow. Listen, we're running out of time, I'm afraid. Any second now, my time is going to run out. I have one last question for you before we say goodbye. If an ordinary listener or viewer of today's episode, if they want to answer your call to action, the ones that you outline in the book here, if they want to do it, what is one concrete step that they can take to be part of the process of healing and redemption as we approach this 2-year mark from the October 7 attack? What can one person do or take from this episode?
I think that's a very good question, and it's not only for one person, it's for a nation and governments and institutions that they all can do the same thing. First of all, is to make sure that they are well informed. The only way to be well informed is to read across the line, the pro and the against, because if you only read in one bubble, you're not going to get what's happening. This is very important. And also, it's like to really understand the slippery nature of anti-Semitism. People who started very much on the side of Israel, all of a sudden I hear those nuances of the doubt and the this and the that, and yeah, we have the right to ask questions, and yeah, we don't have to agree with the Israeli government, but then I can start seeing the slipping into it. And so to be really conscious that it's a latent existence that nobody is guilty of. It's the result of 2,000 years of history of replacement theology and demonization of the Jews. So it's not going to be easy to resist that if you're not aware that that tendency can creep in. So be aware of that tendency in oneself and also in the people around us and the people, the communities that we belong to, and anywhere that we have an impact on people. I think that's very important. And also, like, to really be aware of the drive that we have to project upon other people whenever we're in trouble. The thing that we need to remember now is that now we understand that anti-Semitism grows in any atmosphere of malaise or trouble or unease in the culture. And so to start looking at, okay, what problems are we facing and how do we look at them instead of projecting them and making other people guilty of them. So that's one of the one. To really have an ear and an eye really aware of conspiracy theories and what they can do to people. And also, please just remember the history of the Jews. Like, just think about how much there has been attacks and pogroms and expulsions and demonizations and big, huge, catastrophic times in history. Just remember that, to remember to put everything into perspective again. So that's my 2 cents for the people that would be interested in helping.
Wonderful. Gina, I'll be sure to include all of the links and all of the images you send me after this call. Thank you so, so much for taking the time. It's been really insightful. I've learned a lot, and I hope our readers and listeners have as well. Thank you again.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.